I'd like to welcome everybody to the Orlando Sentinel's editorial board interview for U.S. House District 9, which reaches from South Orlando all the way down to Yeehaw Junction and is currently represented by Democratic Congressman Darren Soto. He's an attorney who served in the state legislature before he was elected to Congress in 2016. And he has been challenged by the winner of August's Republican primary, Thomas Chalifoux, a retired Army colonel who formerly served on the Osceola County School Board and beat a pretty crowded field of Republican challengers to end up as the nominee in this race. And we're going to spend some time talking to them about the issues that are facing our country and this district. And I'm going to start with the first question for both of you, and some of these questions for Mr. Chalifoux, because he interviewed with us previously, will be familiar, but we think that they give the voters the best look at what differences the two of you represent. A majority of Americans in both major parties see the economy as the #1 issue. And they say they trust Republicans more on this than they do Democrats. How do you respond to that on the campaign trail? And we'll start with Mr. Chalifoux.
Well, the economy is certainly the first thing in everybody's mind. I deal with a lot of people, particularly small business, and they're seeing rising costs. Everything from food to fuel and everything between is the rapid increase in cost and the inflation. My assessment is that we just spend 25% more than the government takes in. We have to print more money, it devaluates our dollar. We have to cut wasteful government spending. As a businessman, I'm very familiar with making hard decisions when it comes to expenses. I know that if I have expenses more than my income, I'm going to go out of business. You have to make enough money to stay in business. Unfortunately, the government doesn't operate that way. We spent a lot more money than we take in. Roughly, we're at $36 trillion in deficit. We owe a lot of money that we have to pay, approximately $900 billion a year just in interest payments, and that number continues to grow. So the economy is extremely important where it affects everybody. The cost of everything goes up. The cost of insurance, property tax, amount of regulations. Everything seems to be getting more and more expensive, yet wages don't stay up with that. And that's, even though I give my employees raises, they still fall behind. But you can't continue this. We have to find ways of cutting government spending, wasteful government spending, and at the same time we have to reduce the amount of regulation so we get more Americans working. And it's a significant problem we have in this country, and I see it every day with small business people that I deal business with. I've been in this district 53 years, and it's really has grown. When I came here in 1971, the population was about 45,000 just in Osceola County, and today it's around 350,000. But that's really what I assess is the problem as far as the economy goes.
Thank you very much. Representative Soto, same question.
Inflation has dropped to 2.4%, a 3-year low. We worked with the Biden-Harris administration to pass the American Rescue Plan, the Infrastructure Law, the CHIPS Act, and the Inflation Reduction Act to help, first of all, boost the workforce, improve supply chains, and also to boost production. And so our economy has improved more than any other modern economy in the globe, especially the G7 as a result. We do have a lot more work to do, though, especially in housing. We have 1,000 people moving to Central Florida every week. And so I support Kamala Harris's plan to help incentivize more affordable housing, to help with starter homes construction, to help with down payment assistance, and also to track those hedge funds who are trying to buy up a lot of local properties as well. We know we have to improve jobs around here. And so I've spent a lot of time helping out in Lake Nona and places like Nemours, and to help out with the VA hospital, as well as with BEEP and a lot of our healthcare biotech facilities there. I've also spent time to help Neo City so we can diversify our economy. We qualified for over $500 million in CHIPS Act and related funding, although we only get a small part of that to start with. And we're going to continue to work on major jobs projects. We're also home to what will be the largest Inflation Reduction Act project in the state over in Point Siena, where we're developing Green Garden Village, which will make solar panels, EV batteries, EV charging stations. And Florida Power and Light is set to create the largest solar plant in North America in South Osceola County as well. So we're going to continue to work on manufacturing jobs, continue to work on making sure that we can boost clean energy jobs. And then with the Inflation Reduction Act, we made Obamacare more affordable. We have the second highest enrollment of any district in the nation. We lowered insulin costs of $35. And of course, we allowed Medicare to negotiate and cap seniors' drug prices at $3,500 this year, $2,000 next year. But there's more work to be done.
Thank you for that. I wanted to drill down a little deeper on one segment of the economy, that being consumer costs. I believe both of you touched on this just a little bit. But among those who lack faith that the nation's economy has recovered, it's the cost of things like housing, fuel, insurance, consumer goods, even everything down to fish sandwiches, are often cited as major concerns. What steps should Congress take to give families a break on consumer costs, and particularly with housing, which Congressman Soto touched on, which remains a massive challenge around here? Let's start with Congressman Soto on this one.
Thank you. So first, housing along with taxes are going to be two of the biggest issues going into this next term. I support Vice President Harris's plan to help. We need to increase supply. We need to increase to over 3 million new houses across the nation. So incentivizing new starter homes. We don't have a lot of beginner homes in Central Florida, the 250 to 350 range. We also need more affordable apartments. Locally, we also see hedge funds coming in to buy a lot of these different apartments, and even collusion through algorithms, which was the subject of a US DOJ lawsuit. So there's a lot we can do. In addition, helping out first-time home buyers with assistance. We also have seen energy, both clean energy and traditional fossil fuel energy, increase over this last term or two, as we've seen gas prices go down to about $3 a gallon. We definitely need a change, though, and so we're working on a transition. And that was what the Inflation Reduction Act was all about, lowering costs for healthcare. We see now 4.2 million folks enrolled in Obamacare because of the AC Enhancement Act, made it more affordable for middle-class families, lowering drug prices. In addition, we have to pass a farm bill, which would help with food prices. That's why I fought to get back on the Ag Committee, one of only 2 House members, to help out both with SNAP and with production with our growers, farmers, and ranchers as well, which will also help. We've seen food prices come down, but there's more work to be done on that. And then overall, it's about investing in manufacturing across the nation, because production is part of it, making sure we have more supply of goods. And so part of that is the CHIPS Act, where we are improving the cost of microchips in our production, which Neo City is a part of, even manufacturing of cars that we've worked on through the CHIPS Act, as well as through the Inflation Reduction Act. All these things help lower costs for consumers. And then on insurance, I support the reauthorization of the flood insurance program to help out, as well as a new bill to allow for property insurance to be tax deductible, a bipartisan bill that I just filed a few weeks ago with Representative Bill Arakis.
Thank you for that. Mr. Chalifoux, how do you address this?
I want to first address affordable housing. This is something I know a great deal about. My first house I built in 1978 in Osceola County. I constructed it for $20,000 at the time. They're selling homes in land in BVL for $27,000 to $29,000. That was starter homes. Affordable housing has become not a reality. And I hate to say that, but you factor in the cost of government expenses the amount of impact fees, Osceola County, for an example, just increased their impact fees $11,000 per house. They're paying somewhere around $25,000 just for transportation impact fees. You have water, sewer, plans fees, permit fees. I mean, government regulation, government costs is a really significant problem. When you tack on the federal government giving $25,000 per new home buyer, where's that money coming from? We already have a $1.5 trillion deficit. Are we just going to continue adding to that deficit? I mean, seriously, who's going to pay for it? Where is it going to come out of the budget? I think discussion was Neo City talking about $500 million for a project that created somewhere around 100 jobs. I mean, seriously, government doesn't need to be in the development business. They don't know what they're doing. They pay too much for what they do. I have a great deal of experience in this. I know what I'm talking about because I've done it for 46 years as a general contractor right here in Central Florida. When we talk about energy, solar energy at best can provide 12%. America needs to be energy independent. We need to be drilling. We need to get the energy out of the ground so we're not dependent on the Middle East for our oil and fuel and diesel that runs America. So we have problems in the government, and the problem is we're spending more money than we take in. We have to cut costs. I mean, seriously, the medium house in Osceola County and Central Florida is $400,000. $25,000 is just in order to get affordable housing, you got to cut the interest rate, but we have to cut costs.
We're going to pivot to space. So the U.S.'s spending on space-related programs has skyrocketed, pun intended, with eyes on the prize of human mission to Mars. But the U.S. Space Force, the military arm of the space program, now outspends NASA. First, do you agree with the nation's $70 billion plus investment in space? And second, do you agree with the so-called militarization of space? We'll start with Mr. Chalifoux.
In this country, we have so many programs to fund, and we don't have the money to fund it. We spent roughly $200 billion in Ukraine. We'll find out that we're big losers in that investment. We're spending billions of dollars around the world fighting endless wars that we never come out on top. You're talking about, I forgot, was it $70 trillion? Where's that money coming from? And how does it fit in the priority of what we spend? The first thing we have to do is we have to take care of Social Security. We have to take care of medical expenses, the cost of insurance, the cost of taking care of people when it comes to that. We have the Department of Defense. We have so many other priorities. We have to have a set of priorities and live within those priorities, live within the budget. We can't continue to spend money on all these projects because the value of the American dollar has gone hill. And that's why you have a problem with the BRIC. That is, they're creating their own currency and doing away with the American dollar. That's a significant problem. The world doesn't trust the American dollar because it's lost so much of its value. It's based on the U.S. government having an ability to repay that. We went off the gold standard and we have no standard. We're printing money that becomes worthless. And so when you talk about sending $70 billion in outer space, why don't we focus right now on planet Earth, on the United States, not spend billions of dollars outside this country. We have to do it strategically. I believe in a strong defense. And at the same token, we've got to live within our budget. And we're not doing that right now.
Thank you. Congressman Soto, how do you answer that?
Sure. First, we're proud to have the busiest spaceport in the world here in Central Florida at Cape Canaveral, and thrilled at the job that our most famous constituent, Administrator Bill Nelson, is doing. He's a Lake Nona resident. We are big supporters of both the NASA program, and I'll get into the Space Force in a moment. Look, we have a responsibility to ourselves and to the world to both do commercial and lower space orbit, and also use NASA to do deep space. For lower space orbit, this is already a huge business and a huge driver. I just passed the Launch Communications Act into law, which streamlined the FCC permit process for SpaceX, Blue Origin, ULA, and others. And so that is a huge part of our economy here in Central Florida, space and aerospace. And then with deep space, a lot of these things start as government exploration, but then we see spin-off technologies that become new economic drivers of the future. And if we don't do it, the Chinese certainly will, or the Russians will do it on their own. And I believe that we will find other economic benefits from continuing with the space program. We just launched the Europa Clipper this week, and we will continue on the pace of going around the moon next year, and then going back to the moon over the next 2 to 3 years. And all those things are going to also inspire the nation. As far as Space Force, we've had a lot of information about the Chinese blowing up their own satellites and the Russians creating robotic arms to destroy satellites and the potential of them having weapons in space. So while I would rather not have to have a defense of space, the facts are that we have to do it. If we have multiple different satellites taken out by China or Russia, we could see our world come to a halt here in the United States. How much goes through your cell phone, through the internet, and we're diversifying too with Starlink and with Kuiper, which is going to be helpful in continuing to allow for telecommunications and internet. But I do believe we need to make sure we're continuing to invest in the Cape, a big economic driver and importance for the future of exploration and our security here in the nation.
Thank you so much. I'd like to get back to consumer issues for just a minute. The minimum wage has not increased since 2009 and remains the federal minimum wage at $7.25 an hour. Few people can argue that that's adequate to survive in today's economy. Meanwhile, more than 20 states, including Florida, have raised their minimum wage, with Florida having just in September bumped its minimum to $13 an hour on the way to $15 an hour for most workers. Do you support an increase? And if so, how much in the federal minimum wage? Representative Soto, you first, please.
We've seen wages for the last few months outpace inflation. Has dropped down to 2.4%. I'm excited to see that the Florida minimum wage is now $13 an hour. It'll be $14 next year, on to $15 after that. And we definitely need the federal minimum wage. It right now is unrealistic. And for those states that don't have any constitutional increase in minimum wages, we need to put it on a path to $15 an hour at some point. And I'm open-minded to the timetable for that, but it just simply hasn't kept pace over many years. And on the ideas of spending that have come up a lot here, we passed the Fiscal Responsibility Act, which was a 2-year budget deal to only raise the budget by 1% this year and 1% next year. That was something I was proud to vote for. We saw a lot of spending that happened during the pandemic to make sure that people had shots in arms to get our economy going again. The district had double-digit unemployment between 15 and 18% between Orange, Osceola, and Polk counties. And so we had to make certain investments at the time that were bipartisan, many of them in nature. The other issue is we saw with the Trump tax cuts back several years ago, it decimated a lot of the revenue. And so it's not just about a spending issue. It's about the revenue in our nation being cut substantially during that time period. I'm supportive of the middle class tax cuts and for the child tax credit. But we'll have to look at a lot of these high end earners and corporate tax and other things because it has exploded our deficit and our debt. We saw almost $7 trillion under the Trump administration, another 3 to 4 under the Biden administration. And so I do believe we both have to get our fiscal house in order on the spending side and on the revenue side, but it can't be a one part of the ledger or the other. We have to look at both holistically, and taxes will be, again, one of the big issues going into this next term.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chalifoux, the question on minimum wage and if you wanted to respond to the tax issues as well.
Chris, the minimum wage is certainly way under what the average family can survive on. I mean, it's ridiculous. Our Americans are way underpaid. I can tell you from experience of employing people, we start our people substantially over the minimum wage, even at the rate of $13. I think the lowest is $19, and I love paying more. I mean, it's great if I could, but I support increase in the minimum wage. But the problem is we've seen in California how it's put a lot of the franchise restaurants on, the fast food restaurants out of business. So we have to be careful. I believe that wages are based on demand and market conditions. You take somebody, high school student wants to work part-time, you start eliminating those part-time jobs, and you start eliminating full-time jobs because then you want to hire only part-time people. It's a significant problem. I can tell you from experience, when my father started building houses, he was paying his carpenters $2 an hour. He was selling houses for $7,500, and he was buying his pickup truck for $1,500. Today, it's 40 times the amount of money that it costs to buy a house, and that would be $300,000. 40 times. The average truck is probably 40 times more than $1,500. Are we paying American minimum wage 40 times? Absolutely not. The problem is the cost of everything has gone up. The cost of taxes, insurance, everything has gone so much higher. The wages haven't kept up, and we have so many foreign jobs are being exported throughout the world. America has stopped producing because of the cost of dealing with regulations, restrictions. I can tell you, my experience, it is so frustrating to try and get a building permit. It takes a year to get a building permit. So seriously, we got to solve all the regulations and all the excess taxes and costs.
Thank you for that. Wanted to branch over and talk a bit about insurance. 11% of Floridians lack health insurance right now, which is far higher than the national average of 8%. And most people believe that's almost entirely due to Florida leaders' refusal to expand Medicaid. Do you believe it's time to allow very low-income Floridians to buy policies in the healthcare marketplace, or do you think Congress should make Medicaid expansion mandatory, or do you see other opportunities? And we'll start with Mr. Chalifoux.
Medical insurance is, I've been providing medical insurance for my employees, and it goes up minimum 15% a year. Our problem is we've got a very unhealthy population. 60% of our population has chronic disease. We have to get back to getting people to start eating healthy, exercise. RFK talks about it in his discussion. Americans are very unhealthy, so we have to cure that problem. We have too many people that are sick and eating the wrong things. It's a significant problem. So we have to first start in the schools and educating these children on eating a healthy diet. When I was on the school board, I was really a champion about removing a lot of these fast food items like pizza and Coke and all that stuff, and going with whole foods like rice and beans and vegetables. But it's a significant problem. Yes, we have a problem we need to fix. It roughly runs America $4.5 trillion. We can't sustain that. It's just killing our economy. The Americans can't keep up with the healthcare. We lack doctors and nurses. We have to provide incentives for people to get more people and be doctors and nurses. Maybe we can provide we have to be creative on how we increase the medical personnel to handle all these people, because right now the system is very taxed, very strained, and I'm all for it, trying to figure out better ways to do it. And I believe that we have to get government to reduce the amount of bureaucracy and red tape, and it's a significant problem, and I recognize it.
Thank you for that. Congressman Soto, I believe the original question was about health insurance and Medicaid. How do you respond to the issues?
Sure. First, I was in the state Senate and got to vote to expand Medicaid and saw the state Senate pass in a bipartisan fashion, only to have then Governor Rick Scott flip-flop on his opinions and oppose it in the state house. And it's a real shame because we've seen, I believe, 40 plus states now have expanded Medicaid. Very red states, very blue states. It helps out with so many folks who have mental health issues that are facing addiction. And overall, we get $4 to $5 billion a year that would come in to help with our healthcare system. In the meantime, we did try to get either the folks who are in the Medicaid gap to be able to apply for the ACA on Obamacare, or allow local governments to be able to draw down the funding. The issue is that you have 40 plus states with senators and U.S. House members who didn't want to support it. So we have a real challenge when it comes to that. Of course, I would support continuing to allow them to be able to go on the ACA. We have the second most enrollment in the nation. It has the top 5 Obamacare districts. 3 are Republicans in South Florida and 2 are Democrats, 1 in South Florida and 1 here. And we know one of the big reasons we saw an increase was, 1, President Obama invested in it and had the marketing dollars sufficient. 2, we passed the ACA Enhancement Act and the Inflation Reduction Act that made it much more affordable for middle-class families. Those will expire in about a year or so. And so absolutely critical that we extend those. And in addition, when the state was disenrolling people, many of them unlawfully, from Medicaid after the continuous coverage ended, I led the charge to get Secretary Becerra to allow for a 1.5 year special enrollment for a lot of these families to get on to one of these private plans through the ACA exchange. The thing I'll say is we've seen a huge reduction in the uninsured rate. I am amazed that we now have an uninsured rate of under 10%, which it used to be 1/3 many years ago. So we have more progress to do. It ensures lower costs when everybody's covered, because the most expensive care is uninsured care in the emergency room, and we have to limit that. It's also cruel when we want preventative care, like what was discussed by Thomas just a few minutes ago.
So the next question will be about abortion. What congressional action, if any, would you support on abortion access? And should Congress enact a national right to privacy and self-determination for health decisions? We'll start with Congressman Soto.
Thank you. I supported and voted for the Women's Health Protection Act, which would codify Roe v. Wade and the statutory in federal statute to allow for women to be able the right to choose up until viability and for the life of the mother. And in addition, I support Amendment 4, which would do the same thing and enshrine it in our Constitution. Unfortunately, what the Supreme Court did, they took away a fundamental right, the first in many, 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 many years. And I disagree with it. And now Congress needs to step up. It should be the same right throughout the United States and not to the states.
Well, first of all, I support the abortion issue to the state level. I don't see it I don't support it going to the national level.
That's pretty concise.
I just want to point out one other thing, and Mr. Soto has said that I don't believe in any exceptions. I want to share with you that I believe there needs to be exceptions in abortion, rape, incest in the life of the mother. I've always had that view, and I regarding abortion, you know, I'm a Christian. I've been raised as a Catholic. I believe in pro-life. However, I did say that I've always supported exceptions, rape, incest, and life of the mother, and I am so happy that I'm a new grandfather, and there's nothing more precious than a little baby being born, and I have such a beautiful little grandson. So that's my stance. I don't see it going to in Congress. I don't support that. I believe it needs to be staying at the state level.
We are seeing, as we saw this past week, a dramatic increase in the violence, frequency, and lethality of major weather events, including possibly another storm that is headed our way, right on the heels of Hurricanes Helene and Milton. As we talked about before we started, many parts of District 9 saw heavy flooding through both storms. What role should the federal government play in helping states recover from these climate-related disasters that goes beyond what we do with FEMA? And is there too much reliance on FEMA right now?
It's a great question, because one would say we have a lot more damage in storms. We have more flooding. The issue is that we got a lot more people on developed land. A lot of the land in Florida when I moved here was agriculture. It was either ranch land or it was citrus. A lot of those ranch lands have been developed, and we've now put houses on them with driveways, with parking lots. All that has contributed to storm flooding. And let's talk about FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency. Being in the Army Corps of Engineers, I'm very familiar with flood control, spending 30 years in the Army Corps. Understand a good part of that FEMA money went to support illegal aliens for their support. So, we have to be, one of the things that I noticed when I served in the Army, there's a lot of waste in government. I see it even in local government, the amount of waste. And when it's not your money, you don't spend it wisely. And we have to do a better job of spending money. We have to be, we have a federal emergency. We have to have people on the ground. We have to have great leadership. And that's the problem. Most of these agencies, the lack of effective leadership. Being an Army colonel, I know how to get things done. And I can tell you that leadership is the #1 issue. And then having the proper funding and allocating those resources where they need them. You pre-position things, you get ready. You got to be proactive as opposed to reactive. And I see that in our federal government, our state government, local government. You got to be. Now, I think Governor DeSantis has done a fantastic job. He knows how to get things done. And that's what we need at the national level. People that know how to get things done, people that have had that experience, proven experience, and get things done. And it's about being proactive and about having things already staged and having the right funding. Weather is cyclic. We can't, I don't know how much that is affected by global warming or not. But they talk about the oceans rising 10 inches. It's really risen only a couple inches. So it's a very difficult question. But you got to be proactive, and leadership is the #1 issue.
We saw a lot of damage, wind damage, and some flooding because of Hurricane Milton just recently. It was a lot of work going to all of our emergency operations centers, hearing from first responders, and talking with the administration, with FEMA officials. After assessing all the damage, we were proud that each county got all categories of FEMA relief, including both debris and first responders, rebuilding our infrastructure, and individual assistance. It's clear that climate change is causing more intensifying hurricanes. It's causing more extreme heat, and it's causing rising seas. And so when we look at both long-term threats to our state and our quality of life, as well as to the federal budget with increasing numbers of disasters that we have to fund relief for, we need to address both short-term and long-term issues related to more extreme weather. On the short term, we're trying to make homeowners insurance more affordable through allowing it to be tax deductible in a bipartisan bill that I filed. And we also need to reauthorize the flood insurance program and raise the replacement value, which is currently at $250,000. It's hard to replace some of the homes in the district on that. In addition, in the long term, that's why we passed the Inflation Reduction Act, the largest investment to combat climate change in the history of our nation, over $346 billion in tax incentives to help make sure that we're reducing industry emissions, we're reducing emissions in transportation, that we're boosting clean energy like solar and wind. Nuclear will also play a role, and it's incentivized through the IRA. We'll also need more energy efficient appliances and home design. All these things that will be funded through the infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act, so we could address the long-term and short-term aspects, and by the way, help address the long-term budgetary issues with the disasters claiming an increasing part of the funding that is spent each year.
Last question. We could keep you guys here all day talking about issues that are facing this country, and we haven't had a chance to get to many of them. But one of the issues that is topmost on Americans' minds right now is immigration policy. And there, in the minds of the American people, there is a stark difference between the Republicans and the Democrats. Can you sum up your stance, both of you, on immigration, including any changes that you believe are needed in the law or in funding for enforcement? And let's start with Representative Soto.
I support the bipartisan border security deal that came through the Senate and under President Biden's leadership. Unfortunately, the former President Trump urged many Republican senators to vote against it, and that definitely hurt long-term chances because we see now an executive order in place, which is working. We see border crossings at a 4-year, almost 5-year low, and the president was trying to get Congress to do a lot of these things, limiting it to 1,500 people a day being able to cross, having certain exceptions for refugee status. And we did vote for 22,000 new border security, Customs and Border Protection officers in this last budget, the 2024 budget. But a lot of this new security package funding for border security would have enshrined a lot of these things into law and made it more clear that the president has the authority to do them, and would also have dealt with issues like asylum and dealt with when we reduce border crossings and shut it down, as opposed to allowing more asylum. And that was killed because the former president wanted an issue to run on rather than solve. I also believe in comprehensive immigration reform. I believe in a pathway to citizenship for dreamers, for temporary protective status recipients, as well as long-time farm workers. We have many folks who have these kind of statuses in and around the district. I helped secure temporary protective status for Venezuelans. I led that charge by passing the bill twice out of the House and convincing President Biden to be able to execute it by executive order. We have a lot of folks who are mixed citizen and immigrant families, and this has also helped our workforce. Increasing the workforce has been one of the reasons why inflation has gone down, and immigration is one of those parts of it. So at the end of the day, we need a balanced approach, and that it's something that I support if given the opportunity to vote for it in the future.
Mr. Chalifoux, your take on immigration.
Darren, I vastly disagree with what you just said. For the last 3.5 years, the Democrats have just opened the borders. You have a gentleman called Alejandro Mayorkas has refused to do the job. Bottom line, he has not done the job. The House has voted to impeach him. You voted against that. Frankly, he should have been fired. He did not secure the border. You can talk about blaming the Republicans for this immigration problem. Not so. You look at the numbers when President Trump was in office, it was 1 million or less. When the Biden administration came in, they allowed somewhere between 15 and 20 million. We really don't know because we don't know how many gotaways. And what about all the Sentinel that came in our country? What about all these people that mean us harm? What about the people that are convicted felons and sex offenders? You voted against it, Darren, and you're blaming the Republicans. Now, part of that act was to allow 5,000 a day. What's wrong with 0 a day? That was one of the main issues. Why do we have to have 5,000 a day? Why can't we just say, no more people coming in until we figure out how to handle the people that are here? Now, we have a really domestic problem. What do we do with all these people? We can't deport them. That's not realistic. We can deport the bad people, the people of crimes, convicted of crimes. But seriously, it's a significant problem that the Democratic Party has put on America. We have to fix it. I don't know where we're going to find the funds to do that. It's just a problem that the Democratic Party, Darren, and you have made America much worse off.
I do want to thank you both very much.
Yeah.
Before we go to our closing statements, I wanted to remind our viewers that the Sentinel will be making a recommendation in this race, but we don't expect you to just go on our endorsement. We want you to take a look at both of these candidates. Both of them have websites, social media presences. They've made appearances at public forums. They've been working very hard to earn your vote, and both will have other opportunities to reach out to you. So take a good look, see which one of them represents your views and your priorities as a voter in this very big district. Most importantly, remember that either by mail ballot or in person at early voting sites or at the polls on November 5th, you have to vote for your voice to count. And with that, I'd like to go ahead and ask our candidates to wrap it up. Mr. Chalifoux, will you take first pitch?
Well, thank you, Jay and Julie, Chris, and Darren for allowing me to participate in this. I love our country. I think we're going in the wrong direction. And frankly, I believe I can do a much better job as being your next congressman. I have the experience, not only as a 30-year Army veteran, as a businessman, as somebody that served in the community. I've served 22 years on the Osceola Kissimmee Board of Adjustment, 8 years on the school board. I believe we can do better. America's going in the wrong direction. I believe we can turn that around. This is the greatest country in the world. That's why people are trying to get to our country. They're jumping over fences and walls to get here. We just got to have a way of managing that. So thank you very much again for everybody participating. Darren, I wish you best of luck, and thank you all.
Thank you very much. Congressman Soto, would you like to wrap us up?
Absolutely. Thanks to the Orlando Sentinel and to Thomas for being here today. It's been an honor to deliver for Central Florida over the last few years. First of all, in infrastructure, we've helped bring back over $3.5 billion to help expand I-4, with over half that funding being federal through the American Rescue Plan and the infrastructure law to help you be able to improve commutes here in Central Florida. We brought back funding to help Point Santa Parkway, $1.3 billion, of which a little less than half was federal funding to also help with commutes. Our airport got more than any other airport in the state, over $300 million to expand our Gate C, and also to expand both the runways and the pedestrian bridges there. And we have to do more. We're investing in Lake Nona. We're investing in Neo City. We're investing in our infrastructure to help out tourism. Fought hard to be on the Ag Committee to help our local farmers, ranchers, and growers. We're also making sure to protect our environment, which is why we're not only trying to combat climate change and doing something about it, but also improving with the Army Corps of Engineers, the local lakes and Shingle Creek and other creeks in the area. But we have more work to do. Housing is a real challenge, and that's why I'm proud to support Vice President Harris's plan to help build more than 3 million new houses to help with so many folks across the district. Taxes will also be a big issue. We're going to need to make sure we boost the child tax credit, encourage more people to have families, and continue the growth that we have in Central Florida. When we started 4 years ago, and before President Biden took office, I was in the chamber on January 6th. I saw the worst it could be, and we've clawed back from the pandemic to have the most successful economy in the world, better than any other modern nation right now. And inflation has dropped to 3-year lows. The border crossings have dropped to 4-year lows. We have more work to do. but we need to continue to be productive, have bold visions, and continue to deliver to help improve the quality of life of my fellow Central Floridians. And I hope to earn your vote.
Thank you so much. We very much appreciate both of you, your willingness to let voters see that there are very clear differences and also some very strong similarities between the two of you. And we wish you both the best of luck.